My name is Lloyd Pitman. You spell the name Lloyd Pitman.
And how old are you, Lloyd?
81.
And when were you born?
1930.
1930.
Well, I'm glad that I was asked to do this because I do have quite a good memory of what went on over there at that time. And so, whether my memories are very good to anybody or not, I'm glad you asked me to come up here to talk to you about it.
Okay.
And I've always been happy to meet the Korean people here in the United States so I can tell them that I was there.
Okay. When did you enlist, or were you drafted into the
I
military?
enlisted in the Army in July 1948.
Okay. Did you enlist as opposed to being drafted?
I knew sooner or later that I was going to have to go to the service. So I was 18 years old. I just went in. I figured get in there and get it over with so I could go on with my life.
Okay, so you went in at what age?
18.
18. That's pretty young to join the Army. Did your parents
No.
agree with this?
I tried to go in when I was 17, but my mother and father wouldn't sign for me. See, what happened in my family, I lost a brother over in France in World War II. And so my mother wasn't too happy about me going to service.
I see.
I was the next, the youngest boy in the family. I had 3 brothers in World War II.
And one of them was injured or died there?
He got killed over in France.
I see. The other 2 came home.
Yes. One served in New Guinea and Philippines and Okinawa.
What was your specialty in the military?
I was an infantryman, rifleman.
Rifleman. So
Right.
you were right there in the front.
Right.
Okay. And did you rotate your destinations when you were there?
What do you mean?
Did you like go from place to place? Did you stay in one city or one front line? Did you go around a lot?
I was all over the place. I was infantry.
Okay, so you were all over the place.
Okay, let me tell you about that. The 19th of September 1950, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I landed in Incheon, Korea. Okay, the city was on fire and there's been a lot of shooting there. I spent my first night, we bivouacked in the Incheon ballpark. The next day we walked all day long, and I don't know exactly, well, there's a place there, been an Army communications center called Ascom City. We went by there. Well, we slept that night on the mountainside. The next day we loaded on trucks because they told us we was going south to set up a roadblock at Suwon. Okay, we rode on the trucks. We was ready any minute because you didn't know when you was going to get shot at. We got to Suwon Air Base, it's about dark. Well, the enemy still had the air base. We ran them off from it. And we had a good firefight with them. Well, that night, at that Suwon Air Base, we had tanks, trucks, and everything. So we dug a foxhole. An airplane came over and circled. It looked just like one of ours. It got down to the end of the runway, still in the air. He turned on his landing lights. So the tanks and trucks turned on their landing lights too. But what it was is an enemy plane, and machine gun bullets were flying everywhere. Well, we shot back at it, but it got away. The next day, we attacked a hill south of Suwon Air Base. Our company went up the mountain. G Company stayed in the valley. F Company went on a right over in the wooded area. We went up that mountain, we didn't see a thing. We dug in. Well, that night, it got dark. The North Koreans were trying to figure out where we were. They come up the road singing Banzai. Well, everybody started shooting at them. Well, next day, nothing went on very much. There's a temple ground down over the hill, over the mountain. We went down to the temple ground and had a chance to wash and shave and like that. Well, that night we was on the hill again. It got dark, and I heard somebody holler. We had a guy down below us a little bit. There's a column of tanks, enemy tanks on the road. He started shooting at them. They said, "Don't shoot at him." He's using tracer bullets. Well, first thing you know, ka-wham, 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 those enemy tanks are shelling our hill. There's dirt, sod, rocks are flying every direction. Well, then our tanks opened up down on the road. They set about 4 of those enemy tanks on fire. However, some of the tanks did go through the line. Our division headquarters is set up at Siwan Air Base. Some of those tanks went through that division headquarters, killed men that was in the tent asleep. They killed one of our big wheels in our division headquarters. And then they got into hiding, but the next day, some of our bazooka men went and found them and knocked them out. Well, the next night, we figured we was in for an attack. It didn't come. So the next day, we all moved off. We walked all night. We was going to attack them, which we did. Well, that next morning, they said the 1st Cavalry Division is here. Well, there's many enemy tanks here, and they had a fight with them. Then our platoon leader, lieutenant, he came up and said, "We're going to attack across that bridge, up a railroad track." And so we did. Bullets was flying everywhere. About then, I was wishing I was back home. Well, we moved up on the line. The North Koreans was right out in front of us, and we were shooting back and forth. Well, then later that afternoon, we attacked again. I had a bazooka, but it's old. It didn't work. We went over a hill. There between these buildings sat 2 North Korean tanks. We had no rocket launcher ammunition left, except what I had. The ammunition is old. It was manufactured in 1940. It was just like throwing a baseball at one of those tanks. I shot all 10 rounds at the tanks. I admittedly did hit one of them a couple of times, but I set one round hit a shack that was hiding behind it, set the shack on fire. It drove them out on the road. Well, they moved down there, was going to get behind us and murder us. But fortunately, some of our tanks come up the road and they got them. Well, then we moved north. There's a big hill there. Incidentally, today on that same mountain, there's a monument because that hill is where the first Americans met the North Koreans in July 1950. We attacked that hill. Some of the guys went up there, went wild. They got just about to the top of the hill. The North Koreans mowed a bunch of them down. I got up there. I had a friend that kept telling me, "You better stay down." He says, "Nope, I want to get a shot at him." He got up his knee to shoot. All of a sudden, there's bump, bump, bump. Looked on the back of his shirt, blood was coming out, and he screamed, "Medic." Well, I reached out to get him to pull him in the hole. And every time I reach out, one time a bullet came right between my arm and my face. I got him in the hole. I yelled for the medic. Well, the guy with me says, "We don't need a medic, he's dead." So we had a firefight on that hill. Well, it ended. A North Korean soldier came out to surrender. That night, we dug in, we was going to stay on the mountain. Well, we had lost a lot of men. Even our battalion commander got a bullet through both knees. So they said, we're going to pull back. Next day, they had an airstrike on that hill. 2 other companies decided to take it, which they did. But the North Koreans, most of them had withdrew during the night. When they retook that hill that day, they only shot about 5 North Koreans. Well, I was sitting by a tank. They figured we might get attacked from every direction. I was sitting by the tank. Our machine gunner got hit, so I took over the machine gun. There's an enemy tank over in some bushes and over between some houses. One of our tanks hit it and set it on fire. It was burning. But believe it or not, those North Koreans had loaded that big gun on that tank, and the heat from that tank set that round off in that chamber, and they came over and hit the tread right on the tank that I was sitting beside. Well, that end of the firefight was over. So they took our platoon. There's a little village. We went over that little village to round up who was there. We got the communist guy that was in charge of the village. There's a Korean woman screaming. He had the North Korean flag painted all over the door of the shack. They found him in a hole in the shack. They brought him out. That poor old woman, I think he killed some of her family. She picked up a rock and hit him in the head. Well, we had about 20 prisoners. We was taking them out, walking down the road. 2 of these young Korean men says to me, "Soldier, where are you taking us?" Well, I said, "We're going to take you down there, and we're going to interrogate you, and then let you go." I said, "How did you learn English so good?" He said, "I went to an American school in Seoul." Well, we got these people down there, and they'd seen something that they knew that we didn't. We set them in a rice paddy. When we started putting the guards around them, they all started crying, because apparently they'd saw the North Koreans get a bunch of people in a group like that and then mow them down. We told them there's no harm going to come to you. We just want to talk to you. We brought them up rations so they could have something to eat. We interrogated them, and we let them go. Well, for the next 2 days, we combed all those hills, seeing if there's any North Koreans around. Well, I had a machine gun set up. There's 3 or 4 little buildings down there. They was going to send 4 or 5 men down there to see if it was there. They said, if you get shot at, you shoot back. Well, anyway, funny, over on the hillside, these 2 North Korean soldiers jumped out of a foxhole. One of our Korean soldiers who had with us dropped his knee, and he dropped the both of them. Well, right then and there, the fighting around Suwon-Osan had ceased. So we sat around for a few days. One day we were sitting there, and then what they call the wall at Suwon, Korea, there's some North Korean soldiers come down behind that, started shooting at us. Well, we got them. So 2 days later, we all loaded in trucks. We went crossways of Korea, clear down to Daegu on the trucks. Then we got on a train, we went to Busan. Well, up near where the UN cemetery is now, we set up a bivouac. We was there about a week. Then they issued us winter clothes. We set out in Pusan Harbor on the ship for 2 weeks. It was about the 1st of November. The ship weighed anchor and we went north. We went way up the coast to a village called Iwan, way up in North Korea. We got off there. We spent the night on the beach. The South Korean troops had already went through. There's nobody left to shoot at. So the next day we got on trucks. We rode all day. One of the cities I remember going through was Pukchon. That was fortunately, that was the apple orchard country. The Koreans sold a whole bunch of apples on the truck to us. Well, that night we was up by a lake. I don't know what the name of the lake was, but we dug in. Next morning, it started moving. We walked all day. Then that night, we went up a high mountain. Most of the men was tired, a lot of them fell out. But for the grace of God, we walked right into a North Korean position. But when they heard us coming, they took off. I was so tired, I found a dry wash, had some leaves in it. I laid down there and put my blankets over and went to sleep. The next morning, a sergeant and I, we started looking around. Now, at 150 feet where we spent the night, the cooking pots are still over the fire and the rice is warm. So we had warm rice for breakfast. Well, we stayed on that hill. We did have some patrols. We went out, took many, many prisoners. Well, then we went down, we moved down to another place. The North Koreans tried to go through us down there. We shot at them. They got away. Well, the very next day, up at the top of the mountain, this North Korean come out waving a white flag. And he had one of these surrender passes that General MacArthur had dropped all over the place. He had one of those. So come on in. Well, we gave him coffee and cigarettes. Well, when they saw one got through, looked up there a little later on, there's about a dozen. They came in. There in 2 days' time, we took 85 North Koreans that wanted out of the war. Well, we moved back up in some more hills. I went on a 10-man outpost out in enemy territory. Believe me, I was scared. There's only 10 of us, and we're 3 miles from where the rest of our troops was. Each day, if we needed water, down over the hill about a mile was a creek. We'd take 10 canteens down and fill them up. There's some shacks down there. One day I told one guy, you fill the canteens, I'll hide behind this bluff and watch those shacks for if I see a rifle barrel come out the window I'm shooting. Well, no fight, no shooting came. So we went back. I know the Chinaman knew we was there, or the North Koreans, because being our squad leader, I told all these guys, stay in your foxhole in the morning. I would take my rifle, go out and look around. Now at 150 feet from where we was staying, there was fresh footprints in the snow going up and down this tracks. Well, the only communication we had with the outside world then, they didn't get a phone out to us because every patrol coming out, tried to come out at night, they got lost. Every day, these either Navy or Marine or Air Force planes, they knew we was there. They'd fly over us, fly real low and look at us. And then when they went down over the side of the mountain, down the valley, you'd see that pilot in the plane wave back. We was out there 3 to 5 days. Food ran out. I told 2 Koreans. One's name was Lee Chao Su, and the other's name is Sok Jung Nae.
These are South Korean?
Yes. I said, we're going in and see what has happened. We didn't know what maybe our troops had got drove out. We was all alone. So we started in. We got shot at.
You started going back into the, go back?
Back to the company to see
Okay.
why they're supposed to brought us out food and our mail.
Supplies are not coming.
Well, I went back. We got shot at. We went down over the hill in this village. There's some North Korean soldiers right after us. All of a sudden, I was tired. I laid down. Here one of them come down the street with a submachine gun. I laid my rifle over the side of a rock there, and I dropped him. Well, he didn't bother us no more. We went back. We got back to our outpost. They had found us, and they brought us out food and mail. Well, we hadn't had no food in 3 days. So 2 days later, believe me, I was scared every night. I know one night, one of the guys in our, he is an American soldier, he built a heaping bonfire. Well, when it comes my turn to go on guard, I see that bonfire. I says, do you know what they're out there watching us. I says, there's 10 of us. And I said,
Put that out.
they'd walk right through us. I put the fire out. Well, the next day, a patrol come out and said, you guys come in. We went in. I had froze my feet out there. I had an awful time walking. Well, we moved down. We moved up, keep going north. We got this village. Well, unfortunately, I got to sleep in the house that night. Next morning, they had a firefight with some North Koreans. It ended. Next day, we started walking. We walked and we walked and we walked. Didn't see nothing. That night, we slept in a house. Next morning, we shoved off again. Raining, cold. We got up there to, I guess it's the Fusen Reservoir. It was snow was deep.
What reservoir?
Fusen.
Pushin?
See, there's Fusen, and then the Chosen, where.
Great.
Anyway, we got up there, spent the night. Well, they said the next day, we were froze up, shot up, half starved to death. They said, we're moving out of here. Where are we going? Well, we're going off the line for a few days. We walked up, which I found out since, was the highest mountain in North Korea. All day long, we walked up that mountain. We got to the top. It's easier going down the other side. Our artillery was set up down there. Immediately,
At the bottom of the hill?
yeah. They told the cooks, get up, fix these men something to eat. Well, we had corned beef hash and black coffee. Well, I knew a guy in that artillery outfit. Fred went to Japan with him in 1948. I said, you see any Chinese? Well, he said, today out there in front, our artillery fire killed about 200 of them. You want to go out there and look at them, you can. I said, no, thank you. For I didn't know what made some of them alive. Then some trucks came and got us late in the night. We went over this village, Pumsan, North Korea. Incidentally, I met at one of the Korean churches here in Syracuse. I met a Korean that had been his home when he was a boy, but when the Russians come into North Korea, his family went south. Well, we was in Pungshan about a week. We kept hearing all these rumors, the Chinese. Refugees kept coming in, tell us. Out there in those woods, the Chinese are there. Nobody would believe them. Well, then the news came back how our men was getting beat. The Marines in our battalion was getting beat at the Chosen Reservoir. Well, that night an outpost got fired on. We went up there. And the next morning, I took a patrol out. You couldn't tell where anybody had been because it snowed during the night. So we went back to that village of Pungshan. We got back there, had a hot chow. That night, they came through again. The last men that had went to Heisingen on the Chinese border at the Yellow River, they was all back through. So they said, we're pulling out.
From Pushan.
From Pungshan. So we left Pungshan that night. It must have been 40 below zero. We went down the road. We found some buildings we slept in. The next day we got word that the Chinese had pretty well leveled that town where we was at. So we headed south. Where were we going? We didn't know. We found out there's as many behind us as there was in front of us. So we got down the road a ways. It was cold. I had to take an outpost to go on a hill. I did. I darn near froze to death that night. My feet froze again. Well, the next day there, the day before, we had gunfire, all kinds of it. We looked out there in front, looked just like pine trees, a whole bunch of Chinese soldiers coming in. So, fortunately, we pulled back again. Well, that night was the night I froze my feet. The next day, we got on trucks, the last of us did, and got out of there. Where it went to, I don't know, but one of the men in my platoon says to me, Pitman, you had froze your face. I could feel up here, down to here, I had a large blister. I wrapped my towel around my face. Where that blister went to, I don't know. Well, that night we got to the city of Pukchon, North Korea. We spent the night there. Those Korean people, God bless them, they had a warm home. They asked us told us we'd come in and stay. If it hadn't been, I think I'd have froze to death. Well, the next day we got on the train. We got to Hamhung. At Hamhung, we set up a perimeter around the city. The Chinese is coming in. So then, after they got all the material and everything out of Hamhung, we went back to Hungnam. We set up a perimeter there. The Marines came back from the Chosen. They went right to the ships and left. And the 3rd Division and the 7th Battalion, we were delaying action. Well, at that perimeter, my platoon, we got a job. There's a bridge across the Chonan River, about a mile across, and it was loaded with TNT because when the last troops and supplies come across, the bridge is blown up. The sad thing about being there was refugees had gathered by the hundreds We couldn't let them across the bridge because they didn't know what made some of them the Chinese soldiers. They'd try to run across the ice. They said, shoot in front of them, hit the ice, and that'll scare them to go back. Well, that day before the bridge was blown, God knows how many South Koreans came across there, or North Koreans. We got to the port. Well, we was on that bridge outpost there for 5 days. We got back to the port. We went out to a ship in the harbor. I was amazed at the hundreds of sea ducks flying around the ships out there in the harbor. Well, the ship I went on was the General Mitchell. Sitting off beside us was the USS Missouri, the battleship. They called that in off the high sea to fire support and to give the troops a morale builder. Well, I remember on the beach at night, that thing would shoot. You'd hear them big bullets going overhead, sounded just like a boxcar rolling end over end. Swish, swish, swish. Well, the next day, we was loaded on the Mitchell. All these guys had brought North Korean guns with them. The sailors was buying them just left and right for souvenirs. Lordy behold, that was the only time in my life I was ever a millionaire. I had a roll of North Korean money in my pocket. Well, the ship took off. Next day we got in Busan. The Red Cross girls was there with their coffee and donuts. On that ship, I'll backtrack a minute. When we went on that ship, they told us to stash our gear. A Navy lieutenant come by and said, "You men follow me." We went downstairs in the ship. There was a large shower room and a great big heaping stack of clothes. Most of us hadn't had a bath since August before, and this is December. They give us all a cake of soap and a towel. 24 minutes at a time, went in and took a shower. Then we come out, went through the pile of clothes, and found underwear, socks, and clothes to fit us. Well, then we had a good hot meal. The next day is when on that ship, they had a store. I had ice cream and candy bars for the first time in 3 or 4 months. Well, the next day, like in Busan, we got off the ship. We went to Busan Railroad Station. Where we was going, nobody knew. Next morning,
Go ahead.
Next morning, we got to Daegu, South Korea. Well, all these promoters was around the train selling apples, scarves, whiskey, which we was told not to drink. Then we moved out. We went to a city called near Yongsan. Our division had been beat up so bad that we was there for about a week and a half, getting re-equipped, new equipment, replacements came in. Well, there we had our Christmas dinner. And, that we had a wonderful Christmas dinner. Christmas afternoon, I went up on the mountain. It was my turn to go on guard. The Army gave us all 2 cans of beer and 2 cigars for Christmas. The colonel came through shaking hands with us. I went up on that hill, Christmas Day. The only thing I could think about was what was my mother and father and brothers and sisters at home thinking. That was, let's see, 48, 49, 50. That's my third Christmas away from home. So a few days later, we went down, we got on a train, headed north. We got to a city called Yeongju. We got off the train and dug in. And then during the night, they said, come down off the hill. We went north again, right in the middle of the night, to another city called Tangyang. The North Koreans and the Chinese was there. Well, unfortunately, sad next morning, we was out around the shack after drove the enemy off. There in the creek bed lay boys and men, 15 or 20 South Koreans and North Koreans had lined up and shot before they moved out. Well, we went on the hill outside of there, and well, we got in another firefight with them. Then, it was still going north. We moved again. The next town we got to, the North Koreans had taken off. What we was mostly fighting, our company was, just groups of North Koreans, 15 or 20, that would stay behind, give you a firefight, and then try to take off. Well, we got up on a hill. Next day we went on north. Didn't see nothing. Next day, there's an awful firefight between North Koreans and South Koreans, but they didn't hit us. Well, they told us we got to take that mountain. We did. Went up it. I don't think there's 12 or 14 North Koreans up there. They shoot at you and then they run away. But they could have killed you. So we came down off there, spent another day or two. Then we moved up again to a place called Pyeongchang Pass. We was at Pyeongchang 3 or 4 days. Well, all of a sudden one night, I was on the field phone. They said, get your stuff together. Well, we made an attack out of there against the North Koreans. And that next day, the next night, get your gear packed to get out of there. Why? The whole 2nd North Korean Corps, plus Chinese, is coming right at us. We was in a valley, and behind us, on either side of the road, there's cliffs about as high as that cross up there. Well, we sat there a few minutes. We heard some mumbling. Here comes some North Koreans. They're coming over there with dynamite. They're going to try to blast that path shut so we couldn't get out there. But we caught them first. Well, me and a friend of mine was down in the village. 3 or 4 houses, nobody there. Well, you could hear it. You could look out there and see them coming through the snow. We set the shack on fire so we could see them. They couldn't see us. And man, we really shot at them. Well, we pulled back, got down to another place, and they were out in front, but I don't know why they didn't attack. But our Air Force and Marine and Navy Air Force worked them over day in and day out. Well, then we moved out of there, walking, of course. We went over to another place. Well, I'd heard of Chichon. we was north of Chichon, dug in, and they was right out there in front, but they didn't get within rifle range of us. Our mortars and artillery done a job on them. Well, then we pulled back to Chichon, had a few days rest, had some hot chow. They had a PX truck there. Candy bars and like that we bought. Then we moved again, made another attack. Well, this time we was heading to the 38th parallel, a village called Hyani. We went up there, didn't see nobody, but we dug in. Well, I don't know why the enemy quit withdrawing, but that night, down the valley, you see lights of trucks. They took off. Well, we stayed there. Then they said, okay, we're going off the line. We went off the line, and by that time it was May. They came out and announced that rotation had started. Going home. Well, I've been away from home 30 months. 2 years in Japan, and so far up that time it was about 7 or 8 months in Korea. Well, they says to me one day, company commander says, how would you like to go home? I said, who wouldn't? So, about 4 or 5 days later, we moved up again, and I thought, oh God, we were going to get into it again with them. Here a sergeant come over, he called my name. He said, you ready to go home? Yup. He's okay at a certain place this morning, you get on a truck. So I got on the truck, I went over to the rotation center. We got back down the road to another rotation center. We started they said that night, chow. Well, the guy bucked the chow line in front of me. He turned around and says, I hope you don't mind. I looked at him again. He was a boy I went to school with. So we went down through Korea, we went back to Taego, down to Busan, and I came home.
What year was that?
1951.
In May.
Yes.
And you were on your way home?
Yes.
And what happened when you got home? Was there a lot of welcoming, big parties? Did you get big...
Well, let me tell you this. When we went out to go overseas to Japan in 48, there wasn't 12 people at the dock to see us go. Well, we had a bad opinion. Some of the replacements come in and say, oh, you guys are very popular in the United States now. Well, when the ship docked at Oakland, California, there was just hundreds of people. A lot of these men had families in California. They was there to meet brother or father or what getting off the ship. I never saw so much crying in my life. Well, we left the ship. We went to Camp Stoneman. There 2 days. I come home on the train across the United States. I wanted to see this wonderful country I went to war for. I had an aunt. She had always wrote to me in Illinois. I stopped to see her for 5 days. Then I got on to Syracuse, New York here.
What did they do? What did you do in Illinois?
I stayed there with my aunt. Visited cousins, and like that, cousins and stuff that I never knew I had. Well, then I come on home. I got to Syracuse here. The American Legion Marathon, where I lived, my dad didn't drive a car. They brought my mom and dad up here to Syracuse to meet me. I got on home. I had a brother 9 years old, a sister that was about 7. The rest of the kids in my family was there to see me. Well, a kid from downtown came up here on his bicycle. He said, "Hey, how many of them SOBs did you shoot over there?" I said, "I'll leave it this way. I said, I shot at a lot of them, but I didn't tell him otherwise." I went on to stay. Our president gave us another year in the Army. I went on to stay the 4th year. And then I decided that it's time to try something new, so I got out. I went to work for Smith Corona Typewriter Company. I worked there for 42 years and retired. I do belong to the Korean War veterans here in Syracuse. I belong to the American Legion Marathon. I belong to the VFW Marathon. Last week I went to Charleston, West Virginia. We have an association called the Chosen Few of guys that was up there in North Korea. We had a reunion. Chosen Few. And I had a wonderful time at that reunion.
How many men were there?
There's 40. 40 men plus families.
From all over the United States?
All over the United States.
And they had a reception for you, or just meeting and greeting? And
well, we met there, and they had a pavilion set up for us. We went up to the pavilion. Of course, I can't drink beer, but we had sandwiches, all kinds of food, soft drink. We all sat in that pavilion and visited all day. That night, they had a band come in and played songs. The next day, I spent the whole day in the pavilion. I was there two nights and 3 days. So the next day, my wife had to get home. She can drive and I can't. So she drove me home. Next year, the reunion is in Branson, Missouri. I'm going to go to that.
What was your opinion of the South Korean Army soldiers?
Well, at first, they hadn't been properly trained, and like that. But the ones that survived the first year was good soldiers. However, the sad thing was with these South Koreans we had in our unit, they just got picked off the streets in Busan, sent to Japan, gave a rifle, 2 changes of clothes, and there's a buddy system. We're supposed to show them what to do. Well, those men, but with no means, were soldiers, but they stayed with us.
It was nothing like your basic training. You sounded like you had an immense amount of basic training and knew what you were doing when you were there.
Yeah, because see, I was in the occupation of Japan 2 years before that Korean War started.
So you were a very experienced soldier.
I was very experienced, but these Koreans wasn't. But the next spring, the ones that were still with us, they were darn good soldiers. Most of them could speak English. Of course, the first English you learned was how to cuss and swear. But
what other foreign troops did you meet? Did you meet any Turkish or English or Canadians?
I met Belgium and French.
What do you think of those soldiers as our allies?
Good.
They helped you out?
One night, we was at Checheon, South Korea, on the road. The Air Force had killed a bunch of North Korean soldiers. Well, incidentally, they had oxen hauling their supplies. When those French soldiers came back, saw that, they started hacking up them cows so they had something to eat. Well, in Washington in 1995, when we dedicated the memorial, I met a bunch of those French and Belgian soldiers. I shook hands with some of them Frenchmen. I said, was any of you guys the guys that hacked up those dead cows on the road? No, it's a Checheon. They laughed. We did meet in Washington in 95. I met soldiers. There's a lot of soldiers there from Korea. There's a lot of soldiers there from Belgium, France, Thailand, Philippines, New Zealand, Australia. I didn't get to see him, but they met one Turk. They asked him if he brought that knife along. He hacked yours off with. But
What do you think of the Korean War Memorial in Washington?
I think it's wonderful.
What was your first impressions when you saw it?
That told it just like it was, rain, and everybody wearing ponchos, and on that patrol. That's just the way it was in Korea.
Walking in, patrolling.
Walking and patrolling in the rain most of the time.
Do you have any animosity against the North Koreans for what occurred? Or the Chinese?
Okay, I have animosity against the North Koreans. There's a friend of mine got took prisoner July 14th, 1950. That was my birthday. He is the 24th Division. His unit got overrun. They put him on what they called a death march. He said those North Korean soldiers, if one of them happened to walk by you didn't like your looks, he'd either bayonet you or shoot you. And when I was down to Charleston at reunion, I found out from a man there that, okay, there've been a bunch of American nuns in a Catholic school in Seoul. They tried to claim what they call it, diplomatic immunity, but the North Koreans took them and they marched them north too.
The nuns.
That's what a guy had told me down in West Virginia. But the North Korean soldiers at that time, they were a bad bunch.
They would just kill people just for the heck of it. As prisoners of war.
Yeah. Well, the fall of 1950, the 1st Cavalry Division, which is on the opposite side of Korea we was, they came up on a place, and I don't know how many American GIs have been murdered there. There's 2 or 3 that are still alive that got out there, come home. But the North Koreans, they just murdered them. And then this guy told me that you was walking. If you fell out, couldn't walk no more, they'd shoot you out on the spot or bayonet you. And then he said that he said that they didn't like your looks. They get away with it and shoot you.
Do you have any nightmares or dreams?
At times, yes.
Do they reoccur a lot or just?
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while, you reminisce what you experienced.
Right.
What would you say to some young kids today, into the camera, about your experience, and if there was another war started today, what would you tell them?
Well, here's the thing. I would tell them that, okay, we got into a war. We have a wonderful country. Let's do what we can to serve our country. And also the other thing is that I've told friends in my family that ragtag army of ill-equipped American GIs that went to Korea in 1950, we kicked the blocks from under the Iron Curtain. So that's my opinion.
Have you been back to Korea?
No, but my wife wants to go back this year.
Oh, that's nice. What are you going to do?
Well, I hope to go back with a group. And, of course, Seoul and all the cities have all changed. Now, Wonju, Korea, when I went through there, it was a shanty town all shot up. Today, that's a modern high-rise city with better than 1 million people.
So this year you're going to go?
I hope so, yeah.
How are you going to get there? You're going to go with a group of Korean veterans? Or?
Yes, if we go.
You and your wife?
Me and my wife, she wants to go.
And anybody else, any other veterans going with you?
Well, not from around here, I don't know of any of them. Several of the men from our Korean War Veterans Association here in Syracuse went back.
What can you say? You know, we hear about the Civil War heroes, the World War II heroes, the World War I heroes, the War of 1812. What can you say about the legacy of the Korean War veteran? What can you say about what they did, or what legacy would you like to leave for the Korean War veterans? What would you say about those people, those soldiers?
What are those other wars?
No, just the soldiers in the Korean War. What would you say about those soldiers?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'd say we went to Korea with old, worn-out equipment. We done the best we could. So I would say that we done with what we had, and we done our job. But there's another statement I made that was in the paper here a long time ago. When I first came home, went to work in the factory, a lot of World War II and World War I veterans, they'd say, you weren't in no war, you was in a police action. But here's the thing one comment I've made, I'll make again. As far as I'm concerned, the man that got killed in Korea was just as dead as the one that got killed in World War I and World War II, and he died for the same reason, of fighting for his country. If the Russians hadn't been stopped in Korea, you bet your boots you'd have had Japan now, as well as probably before Taiwan and the Philippine Islands. So stopping them there in Korea, we let the Soviet Union know they're hands off in the Far East.
We've heard the comment, the forgotten war.
Yeah, it is.
Versus the police action. This is your idea, like...
Well, here's the thing. It never came to life until here a few years back. Each and every year down here to Syracuse at the War Memorial, I've had many students come to talk to me from Syracuse U. They say there's nothing in our history books about the Korean War, and we feel by talking to a veteran, we can get a better term page by talking to a veteran on some subject very few people know nothing about.
So you want to keep this legacy alive?
I would say so, yes.
And I see you have a bunch of medals.
Right.
What are all those medals, Mr. Pitman?
Well, the first one down here is 4 battle stars. That's the 4 battles I was in Korea. The next one is a ribbon issued by Belgium, the Belgium ribbon for Korea. The next one is a Belgian War ribbon. Over here, Army, Occupation Japan, National Defense, United Nations ribbon, Army Service, New York State Conspicuous Service Cross, Army Reserve Medal. The next one is 50th anniversary of the Korean War. The next one is Disabled Korean War Veteran. The next one, Good Conduct Medal. This ribbon was gave to us by the government of South Korea last year. Navy's, being we was up there serving close to the Marines, the Navy citation, and the Navy combination ribbon, the Combat Infantry badge.
Quite a few. It's quite a few medals. You got a lot of experience.
A lot of men have got more than I have.